Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our fishbowl event, and it's a great to have all three of you here. And I'm quite excited for today's discussion, which is focused on a very critical topic: scaling AI for enterprise impact. That is from pilot success to organization-wide transformation. During our recent conversations, one thing what we observed is how AI is rapidly moving from an isolated experiments to becoming a core part of business strategy. And while during those conversations, few things which came out. For example, the scaling AI isn't just a technical task. What we observed where it involves or it depends on one, strong data foundations. Second, the organizational models, the process. Third, the talent readiness. Fourth, the cultural shift. And one of the other important aspects is responsible governance, right? And today, to discuss these themes, we have three exceptional leaders. I'd like to introduce them. First, Chitra Sukumar, SVP Digital Engineering at Schneider Electric. Second, we have Geriel May, VP of Strategy, Operations and Data, Head of Customer Experience at Pearson, and she comes with a experience across consumer electronics and a few other industries, where she will share her experience on customer experience specifically. And third, we have James Lennon, VP of Product Engineering at a Ciklum, customer experience driven engineering and R&D firm. So with this, I would like to dive right in. So let me just start with Chitra, you, right? And from our conversation, I believe that the Schneider began its AI journey with a dedicated hubs. Would like to understand what specific signals that tell you an AI solution is ready to scale across an enterprise, right? So would like to understand that from you.
Okay, Schneider began its scaling of AI maybe about 2.5 years ago, before generative AI made it the day-to-day conversation across every single conversation around software itself. So what we started is we created a centralized AI hub of about 350 people with the experts, but we always kept in mind that we have to start with the business need and not AI for the sake of AI. So the main element was to identify the business need and then see if there is the right kind of data, if there is the right technologies in order to scale. So every time we've looked at deciding if it can move from a pilot to scale was a very early decision we made. And when there was scaling possibilities in terms of data availability, in terms of talent availability, in terms of business need, then we sort of put money behind it. Of course, you always have to experiment if it would work and then scale it further. That's a bit of has always been our approach, to start with the business case rather than a POC.
Okay, good to understand. And Geriel, just to extending that, so I understand that with your experience across industry segments, right? Want to understand if I look at from a customer experience perspective, how do you identify and prioritize AI opportunities that are scalable?
So I think there are a lot of challenges to scale in customer experiences because it depends on where you are in the customer journey, the experience that you're trying to create and the data that's required. So I think the idea of using AI, the same kind of solution pervasively across experiences, I don't think we're there yet, honestly. What I see more is a successful implementation in one type of experience, for example, a call center experience with certain kinds of solutions that work well with AI, where data is pervasively available, and then replicating that kind of point solution in a similar business unit or another part of the world where you have favorable conditions for successful AI.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. And James, just an extension of this, considering you also focus on customer experience driven and that too across industries, do you see any common characteristics that define this scalable UI use cases?
Yeah, I think it's important not to try and reinvent the wheel and try and do things like AI ROI or these changes. What makes great products and platforms are the same metrics and indicators that make AI a great use case. So if it's got good potential, has a good impact on for users, has the data sources available, maybe you use a prioritization framework like RICE or something like that. These principles still apply. I think generally, if we start talking about generative AI and say what's a good use case that this opens up we didn't have before, anything that's unstructured knowledge work. So if it was very structured and you had a clear plan, that's where your AI ML, that's where RPA comes in. I think when it's more unstructured, your things like research, customer support's a great one, right? You've got a kind of unknown query coming in. You don't know what you're exactly going to do with it. Take someone who is a knowledge worker with a bit of experience to pull on what's the right ticket, what's the right knowledge base. That's where it shines. And that can be anything. That can be researching a new client, which is what we can do going ahead for a new meeting or a new prospect, or it might be that we're automating the customer support or the way that an investor looks for a new company to invest in for venture capital. All of these are unstructured knowledge work in some way. And if you've got the data available, if you've got these impact metrics and you're measuring it correctly, we have a framework called Prime. It's a bit of a play on RICE, but it just adds in that potential part of AI that's a bit of an unknown. That's how we identify the use cases. I don't think it's worth trying to start from scratch again. AI is a great feature of your products. You're not necessarily launching a brand new one from scratch.
Good to know. Good to know. Okay. Perfect. And with that, I think one more aspect what we keep hearing is for any use case or an idea, important is for an enterprise, the talent, the process, the operating model, and the fourth being the readiness. That's a workforce or a talent readiness is quite important with respect to adoption of these use cases or a process within an enterprise, right? Chitra, I would like to start with you on this particular segment. That's the second one. Do you have, or is it like how structured are these AI teams? Whether it's like say centralized, or is it embedded within the business units, or is it a hybrid of this? And how effective it is when you're scaling this AI initiatives?
So when we started, Vijay, we went with the hybrid model. Yeah, we kept the experts in a central team. That's about 350 people spread across India, North America, and France. Those were our data scientists, our machine learning experts, etc. And we went for a hub and spoke model with the businesses bringing the domain expertise, because Schneider's business, if you see the product profile, it's very vast with deep domain expertise. Some of it, for example, in the safety products around energy management. Some of it is in the power around data centers and how the cooling is managed, etc. So we have all of these expertise. So we brought these together and we set it up in a hybrid mode. And that has been worked very well for us over the last couple of years, because then we are able to bring the technology expertise, which is also very key. How do you ensure that we are not doing stuff incorrectly? We spoke about responsible AI in the beginning, but that's also something we try and manage centrally. And then we use the spoke model to bring the business case, bring the end user scenarios, and that's how we've scaled.
Oh, interesting. Perfect. And Geriel, if I take this further, if I look at publication as a segment, right? How do you believe this domain and the technology coming together, even in validating or even the scaling of these AI use cases? Is it a similar characteristics, or is there any change would you see in the education and the publication sector?
I would say the publication and education sector have some specific concerns with AI, because publishing is about creating IP, right? It's about content. So when you're in an environment of your product being about peer refereed knowledge, what's the best way to think about how to use AI in a publishing industry? This is concerning. It's disruptive, of course, to publishing. So, a few things I could say. I think really successful implementations in publishing are about operationalizing parts of the business, making the business faster, more standardized in the operation of the business, in service delivery, in product selection. Those are moments that are more business aspects, process aspects that I think are really appropriate use cases in publishing for AI. I have also seen very effective solutions of applying AI, applying various kinds of models to a closed system of data. So, for example, if a student can use AI within a text to generate more questions, more answers in a text environment, in a learning environment, that's an appropriate and scalable use case, but it closes the data available to AI into something that we can understand, where we could reward the author for having generated that unique and peer refereed fact base.
Okay. And James, taking a step further on a similar thought process, so because you advise organizations with respect to adoption of AI, while doing it, do you see or have you seen any best practices or things what you recommend regarding the talent training or a workforce training and the kind of operating model in adoption of AI and the scaling this use cases?
So take those one by one. If I think about the operating model, I think there's the three options we kind of outlined before. We think of them as centralized, mesh, and decentralized. And we recommend those in different cases depending on your industry. So we concentrate on banking, financial services, insurance. That's one of our verticals. There, we're very much going down centralized. That's where both the AI expertise and the infrastructure is centralized. I mean, both here. And the reason for that, it's much easier to know how to keep it regulatory, auditable, actually do all the compliance you're going to need to do in that very low risk appetite environment. If I go the other extreme on the decentralized, another one of our sectors is high-tech SaaS companies that we work with. Okay. They already have very empowered cross-functional product teams that make product decisions, features all the time. Actually, giving them the ability to use giving them the AI infrastructure to own, their approach themselves to own, already suits their model. They can go very quickly. Now, there's trade-offs. Obviously, if they're working in cybersecurity, suddenly that centralized model looks more attractive because of that regulation side. But if they're doing something that isn't, saving lives, protecting things, and it's more of a standard B2B SaaS, B2C SaaS, that's where that model is great because it helps them go really quick and stay competitive, especially in that B2C space. Where we see the mesh is actually where people usually start on either end and come centrally, where there may be something like an R&D team, there may be something more sharing those best practices out to team members, but teams are slowly empowered to experiment themselves, pick up those learnings and use them. So that's actually, we've done it as a technology services because that centralized team can share the learnings over all of what we see on the industry. Obviously, we're doing different things in media and a part of education where they needed to go quick. So we had a lot of learnings. We were in production. Our first production scale AI project was February 2023. 100 days after ChatGPT launch, we had something in production. So having this R&D team push that out to the rest of the teams is incredibly important to get that experience because the team working in banking, they didn't touch AI for a couple of years because banks were not ready to adopt. So that model has really helped us get the learnings out and change minds. The second half of talent, which is a bigger topic, we might touch on it later, but still the same things of hearts and minds, doing change management processes, people, process, technology, and thinking in those buckets of how you're going to change each. Those principles still last. We used those principles when the internet came around and when mobile came around. AI is a general purpose technology that affects everything, and we're going to have to address it the same way. The bigger challenge is going to be the speed of it. The adoption of this is much faster. So everyone's seen the ChatGPT, million users, the fastest ever. Well, actually, the record was broken when they did Studio Ghibli style image generation, where they got 1 million users in an hour. That was the sign-up rate, 1 million paid users in an hour. And that kind of change speed we're not used to. So the challenge for me is not that the tools that we used to do are wrong. We just now need to do them 10x.
Got it. With this, the thing which is coming to me is now is on the culture, and I would like to start with Geriel. So, Geriel, with respect to this particular adoption or a broader adoption of AI, what kind of cultural shifts have proven critical within an enterprise with respect to scale, adoption plus scale?
So I think there are a couple of implications. So when you think about culture in an organization and you think about the extent to which an organization is a learning organization and it's wired for people to change and evolve versus companies that are wired, legacy companies wired for stasis, an important part of a culture is how it views innovation, how it rewards innovation, and then how it views risk as well. So when you think about a culture and various industries have different risk profiles when it comes to AI because of their regulatory constraints, et cetera, how do you stay within the guardrails that are important within your industry that are critical to your success, depending on the product you're delivering, and yet also apply innovation, new ideas, and scale them across your workforce? So I think it's sort of the balance of innovation and risk in a culture, and finding the pockets where you lean into innovation and in the pockets where you lean into risk avoidance that it makes for successful culture and fertile ground for adoption of AI.
Okay. Chitra, I'm taking a step ahead here. Want to understand, have you seen any internal resistance within organization with respect to the same adoption? And to address it, or I would say the boost the adoption, what kind of say steps what you may have taken?
There's always a certain, Schneider is a 150,000 employee company. Yeah? So there's always some sense of fear, some apprehension with what I'd say a groundbreaking technology like this will bring, and particularly because it's been a lot more in the conversations. It's not new, but it's a lot more in the conversations in the last year and a half. So for us, what has been something top of our mind is to really demystify it, to really bring an education program, help people understand where there is value in it for them, for the company, for our customers. That has been a big element of how we've started to work through that. I can't say resistance, but a certain element of uncertainty and fear. The second has been, we've been pretty quick in making this technology available to people. For example, we have a pretty big software community as well, and we made GitHub Copilot, which is what we use, available very early to anybody who wanted to use it. Already people have had it for over a year. So when people play around with it, they get familiar with it, they know what it can do, where it can help, and it really helps a lot in going there. And having the central hub helped us define the rules very quickly. The third element that has helped us, maybe one more minute, is to link it with a sense of purpose. When we are able to show use cases, for example, where our customers are able to reduce their carbon footprint because we are able to help them model their electricity usage, decide when they can go to renewables, when they depend on the grid, when they can go off grid, and they really can showcase these, it really makes a big difference in pushing through that fear and resistance.
Thanks, Chitra. I think that covered, I think, almost all the pointers. And James, I'm coming back to you. So anything else if it's left with the adoption, because you're coming from a services segment. So how employees were, or how easy what was it to have it like the adoption of AI tools and as well as use cases? And second thing is, have you observed anything specific within your customer segment, any challenges and how it's been addressed?
Yeah, I think the education point that was touched on, absolutely. I think the we accidentally did a successful launch when I sent out a prompt guidebook to some of our product managers, and then they started using the tools. We didn't send the tool out. I just got a prompt book. Well, I'll send this to the team. And people started using it. And we saw a lot of people try the tools, especially early on. They didn't know how to prompt. Everyone asks a different way. They got a bad result. They didn't check again. So that was one thing where education, consistent education, and a drumbeat about it, incredibly important. Especially if you go a year ago. In fact, when we did GitHub Copilot, I think it was about June 2022, we first had like that Codex version. It wasn't great. If you think about our profile of our engineers and what we're doing on projects, a lot of our team are 10 plus years experience. Some of them are up to 25 in a single domain. There's not much that Codex model was given them. And then they dismissed it. And it's only this past year with Claude really coming in, actually offering a lot better generation, did we get people picking it up. So there's one side of the constant communication and education, which I think is really important, and getting people to learn how to prompt. Access to the tools just as important. There is one resistance we've came into, which is more on the emotional level, and it's kind of like two things. There's a huge pressure to just do AI at most companies. Not always have a strategy, but just go and do AI into the product in some way. And there's a fatigue with some of the teams on that, of seeing that this is a management thing, this is just a leadership thing. AI affects valuation. It's not going to make a better product experience, or they doubt it. And the other side is this AI part challenges your own expertise. If you're at 20 plus years in Java and now AI's here, you're at zero. So you went from being this knowing, all-seeing, fantastic person to don't know anything about the AI, and that new graduate knows more than me in a couple of weeks. So we've really pushed out with that a big message of treat this as the beginning of your career again. At the start of your career, you learned every framework, everything that was ever coming out. We're all starting on this again. It's fine. Keep that drumbeat, keep that education, treat it again, and have that environment where it's okay to play around and mess with these things without the consequence for it, kind of thing. So yeah, getting over that emotional side has certainly been a big thing of challenging our deep experts to pick up something new that has suddenly came as a surprise to them.
Perfect. I think
so
very pertinent points. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I could just add on another thing about the change curve, essentially. So where you have resistance, where you have early adopters. I think it's interesting when you have a very large corporate enterprise with a number of business units, you have a centralized team that's vetting AI solutions, piloting those solutions, trying to get them out into the hands of people. And then when you have people as citizens of the world, of whatever country they're in, whatever environment they live in, who have AI tools that are accessible to them in their personal lives, and they're using them in their personal lives, those people, some businesses call them the cowboys, the technical cowboys are out there trying these technologies in their personal lives, creating personal assistants for themselves, managing their calendars that way, and pulling that adoption, driving the demand within a large enterprise to have these technologies available in the workplace that they're using in their personal lives. And I think that is very prevalent in large organizations, trying to keep up and choose technologies that match to people's experiences on the fringes.
If you can find those people and make them champions, that's the best grassroots way, in my opinion. The way we found some of our engineers, some of our clients who have these people, and it doesn't matter what level they are, just raising them up and making their voice heard, because I can shout at teams all I like, shout at clients all I like, adopt AI, do things. I fall into that fatigue I mentioned earlier. But when a engineer, product person, when someone in the business stands up and goes, oh, I've used this and made this myself and done this thing, people see it much more real and effective. I couldn't agree more.
Oh, perfect. Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing them. I think these are quite insightful. And I'm moving to the last segment, which is quite important. I think this is something which I've been hearing for the last, almost, I would say, 12 odd quarters. The privacy, the responsible AI part of it, right? And I'll start with Chitra. Want to understand, while scaling this AI use cases within organization, and as well as for the products and the things, have you ever encountered any say concerns over data governance or responsible practices?
Absolutely. I think this is upfront and center when you think of scaling, not even scaling, even piloting, right? Because at the end, it is your company's data that's out there. And if you want to make your company's data available to other providers of tools to enhance their model, it has to be a very, very conscious decision. If not, what are the guardrails that you need to build in, either in the contracts or in the setup? So that's very, very front and center, even when we think of a POC or we want to experiment with a new AI-based tool. But what's also important is the whole ethical guidelines, because when we build our own models as well for stuff that we cannot buy, we try to buy as much as we can for standard functionality, but if we can't, then we build models for our own data-based models. And here we have to be very careful about ethical guidelines. So we do have ethical standards that are defined, and we have an ethics committee that reviews this, especially for AI use cases, to make sure that the guardrails are adhered to. Cyber and data now suddenly become very central, and we have also been focusing quite a lot in our education in making sure it becomes everybody's problem, because your AI solution is at the end as good as your data, and how consistent is it, how clean is it, how well governed it is. And the cyber risks, for every access that we have, the bad actors have the same access as well, right, to these tools. So that these have become very central conversations that were earlier more stuff you thought about at release. Now it's really stuff you think about before you even pilot.
Okay. Got it. And Geriel, the other aspect which I wanted to understand is, have you seen within your segment the transparency, privacy, how important are they? Build, I would say, trust within the users or implementers as well as on the users?
So the ethical questions and tensions are a very deep well in this space, and particularly in the publishing industry. So when you have an industry, for example, a textbook publication, many of your customers are minors. Many of your customers are a B2B government customer. And so privacy is of the utmost importance. We can't have it that children's grades or children's psychometrics are available to the general public. How do we create the right fences and guardrails that allow us to do research using data from user experiences with texts and with learning without exposing that data inappropriately, kind of outside of the walls of those research practices or that content creation practice. So it's of great concern and utmost importance. And I think so far what I see in the with content creators in the publishing industry, a leaning into risk avoidance rather than exposure in that space. I do think that there are smaller disruptive players who have a very different idea of ethical standards and who imagine that access and openness and information that is less peer-reviewed but more pervasively available and cheaper is actually the ethical standard that we should map to. So I think you have very different perspectives within the publishing industry in particular. There are, in terms of employee experiences, there are lots of other things that we can talk about in terms of ethics as well. But in terms of privacy and access, I think those are a really interesting tension in the industry.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And James, I hope you're also seeing this similar aspects in your client organizations. I want to understand how you go about addressing this possible pitfalls or the issues or concerns, I would say, within your client organization.
Yeah, so I think there's a few different aspects to this. It's a huge area. there's a couple of different approaches we have to address some of these risks. I won't get to everything in this answer, but I'll do my best to summarize. We did a conference last year. We repeat it every sort of autumn, winter time. And in that, we had an hour session dedicated to responsible AI, and it was probably the most attended, most engaged, and most questions we had about any other topic. It's the area most people don't know because we've moved from a deterministic system to a probabilistic, and no one knows what some of the answers are going to be. That comes down to the regulation, understanding it, and we have teams that go and help our clients understand that, but that can be a bit easier. It's a bit more on the tick box kind of side. I think there's a bigger risk when you put this in front of customers versus internal, and what the hallucinations can happen. And we sort of have we have a framework that helps us parse those issues out. So I mentioned earlier about the prime framework, which sort of gives us that business impact on one axis. On the other, we have feasibility and risk, and we calibrate the risk with that particular client, and the feasibility is the technology feasibility at that current time. And when we do that, we can plot all the use cases out, and we can easily see in a 2x2 at the top, right, here's our strategic imperatives. These are low risk, very feasible, good customer impact, good, not too much effort, go and do these now. And then we get a second category where it's actually, these are good cases in terms of business impact, but they're too high risk at this point in time. And they're the ones we monitor and continue to assess. So typically on most people's journey, we're starting with those ones which are maybe a lower hanging fruit, easier to do, and get out there. And we also see our clients focusing more on back office kind of automation or customer support, as was mentioned earlier, or these kinds of things. Maybe dipping their toe in personalization at this point, maybe starting to do that, but mainly staying away from sort of the customer side. I think it's important to still do the data bias cleansing if you're adding any data into these systems, and being aware of what certain models can have in them. You know, depending on which vendor it is, if you're using certain open source models, you know, there were some that were very friendly to certain nation states and not to others. It's important you're looking at those biases, much like when you had neural networks before, you have to check these things off as well. So I think this sort of approach of actually continually looking at that risk, plotting it against your own appetite, looking at the data biases, and then finally applying a really robust testing framework. So we've got a whole framework we've created to try and reduce the risk of your LLM agent, whatever it is, making a decision, choice, or answer to the user that it shouldn't be giving, either through hallucination or that's just not its purpose. So we have a whole testing suite that makes sure maybe you've got an agent that gives you recommendations on an outfit. We're going to train it to make sure it doesn't give you recommendations on a ketogenic diet, because that would be a really bad outcome for it to give. And we also have these test suites that check for other kinds of hallucinations. It actually helped us pick up one that was really funny case of, it was meant to be given investment advice at venture capital, and it kept mentioning Michael Jackson for no reason. It would give a 2-3 sentence, here's the actual information you want, and there's no mention of Michael Jackson, would just be appended on the end of the sentence. And through some investigation and testing, we could repeat this and we could see the problem. And it actually was an error in one of the open source like training suites that many people use within LangChain. Mm-hmm. And we were able to submit the fix and do that and really reduce that hallucination out of the system, and probably for many others because it's now in that open source community. But that kind of testing framework to pick those up has really helped us reduce the hallucinations right down, pick them up. And then lastly, which is kind of related to the risk and bias, but I think is just a really good product thing as well. The new version of A/B testing for us is to test against those public tools and see if we, from a human feedback, get a better result. So if someone tries one of our models versus ChatGPT that they'd pay for instance, we have to beat ChatGPT. It's like the old days. If we launched an internal product, it had to be better than someone doing it in Excel, because they always default to Excel and mess around with columns. So we have to be better than ChatGPT in that case. So there's obviously a huge thing on ethics, the copyright, all of that side of things as well. It's a huge topic, but we look at risk, we strong focus on testing, and we always do our A/B testing and user testing as well.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Thank you. And appreciate, I think these insights were, I would say, more than helpful for all the listeners here. And before we end, want to get your sense regarding, if you want to summarize, and towards the practitioners, what would be that one thing you want them to follow or keep in mind as they go towards adoption or even the scaling of some of these AI use cases? Maybe I'll start with Chitra and then go to Geriel and James.
I think one is being open to learn, being open to new things. I think James put it very accurately, saying that anyone working in this space is starting afresh. Yeah, and really to have that mindset. I think the learning curve is there, and the ones who learn to work with AI will really be the people who will make the best use of it, bring the most value as well for the companies they work. While, of course, with that mindset, we still have to be far more cautious about data. We have to be far more cautious about the cyber risks that we bring to the company every time we use this, and be intentional about it. But at the end, there is no AI for AI. Start with the value. It's something that has really worked well for us to keep that value in as a central element of making decisions on when to use AI and when not to.
Perfect. Thanks, Chitra. Geriel, what's your one thought with the listeners?
My one thought is 10 years, 15 years down the road, when we have all kinds of menial things that are AI enabled and, life is simpler. The choices that we make now about AI enablement of more human emotional interactions are incredibly important to our collective mental health of the future. So we see that human beings respond with human emotions differently to a human being that they're present with than a human being who's in a two-dimensional kind of flat environment. And I think that maybe for me it's a caution and a question mark of the tipping point of the kinds of experiences that are appropriate to enable with AI and which ones aren't, and how will we know where the boundary is.
Perfect. James, your thoughts?
On the adoption side, educate and empower. I think we've talked about that point a lot. I think it's really important to keep doing. On the what's ready for scale, I think the product methods, the real value, looking at customer impacts, they're still your keys. There's one side we probably haven't touched is as you scale it, it's incredibly important to make sure what you're building and the infrastructure you put in place is flexible, because this changes often. I remember a couple of years ago, an agent was defined as an LLM that prompted itself and had a search API. Now that's just a reasoning model, and we don't use that term. An agent's got to make a decision, and that can change again. Everyone's getting excited about MCPs now because of the flexibility they give you, or the agent-to-agent protocol. Be ready for these things to just be deprecated at a moment's notice. We had a big shock for some of our clients. We helped them get over this sort of transition where they'd made lots of pilots with 3.5 turbo. And then all of a sudden they found themselves out of date, having to train models again, having to switch models with a deprecated model and a product that's now ultimately worse than what people just get in ChatGPT for free. So that flexibility that you build in along the way as you scale is going to be incredibly important, and even more so in future, because the definition of agent might change. Maybe we get something else. Operator might take off. You need to have this flexibility for whatever structure you put in place to allow these things to scale on a technology basis and infrastructure basis.
Great. Yeah. Thanks again, all three of you. Appreciate all the insights what you have provided, and wish you success in the AI adoption and the scaling journey. I hope we should be able to have a similar thought sharing session maybe 6 months from now, and we'd like to hear exactly the same construct and how they have evolved. Yeah. Thanks a lot again. Thank you for your time.